So please, you're encouraged also to submit your questions either in a direct way, that will be, let's say, use the channel we have, the YouTube, or an email, or of course you can also like come here and use that in one or another way of performance. Please do. I'm sure we have a lot of questions. I would like also to ask the practice and cognition people maybe to join us and come in the middle. Where are you? There are somewhere here, there, so that we have, yeah, please. I think it will be great because we'll have them too. I mean, it's a bigger group, of course, but come on, guys. Where are you? Yeah, it will be nice to have also a little bit more of a discussion and then bring, let's say, the ones who facilitate and the facilitated, let's put it this way. It's very interesting the point you make also, and I would like also to maybe open up a little bit the discussion, maybe the two terms that you have used, the education and the chorus. So it will be, in a way, let's say, I believe that these are like two frameworks or like two, let's say, identities that you try to create within this educational format of the Documenta 14. Where are the cognition?
Practice and cognition, I don't know whether they are. One of
they
them
want
is,
to be incognito, and one is slowly approaching. That's good. Yes, please. What is practice and cognition? That's the first question. Would you like someone would like to give an answer to that?
Do you want to come sit beside me so that you have access to the microphone? No, he doesn't have a microphone, so he needs to. Okay.
Or like here.
You can sit here.
Come. Don't worry. You can be here, I'll be there.
New presenters. Great. Thank you.
So what is the question?
Sorry, what's the question? We are a group of artists and architects. Mostly, we were part of the Artecitya project last summer, Perceiving Academy, and with Erik Ellingsen as our Erik is. And there was an idea from Erik proposed us if we are interested after our collaboration, because it was a big success as well, I have to remember now all this. It was a really good experience for us working together, also with Erik. It went really well as an outcome and as a process. And he asked us if we want to continue working together as a group with among us, like we together and with Erik. And of course, we were happy with that, and we continued. We had some projects of our own, along with Erik's advice, and we formed Practice in Cognition. And about today, Erik, instead of having his video statement, he thought that we could kind of do it together. He wrote the text with us, like, and we kind of performed the text today. Yeah, I don't know.
Very briefly, in our seminar last summer that we met, very briefly, it was a 2-week seminar. In the first part, we made some experiments in the city, walks in an already known city for us, but how to perceive city with our, let's say, closed eyes. We make a blind walk, or a very interesting sound experiment in Rotunda, newly renovated Byzantine temple. And The second part was the construction of some movable pavilions that we moved from LABattoir to the seafront of Thessaloniki, and we inhabited the square for a night, for an afternoon. That's all.
Do we have any questions more? Maybe. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Oh, there is one question, yes, from the public. Please join us and come here. Thank you.
I saw in one of your slides that you had the term. Oh, sorry. That you had the term elective affinities, and I was wondering how you're using this idea in your work.
Okay, so actually elective affinities came actually from Adam. We had been discussing how, because the Athens School of Fine Art was our first partner for Documenta 14 as a whole, not just for the education department. So Anissa Zeko has been leading a course and actually has become inscribed as one of the professors there in order to lead a course titled Elective Affinities. But I think, Anissa, it would be good if you could tell us a little bit more about how that's been going.
So, yes, so it's about it says. The School of Fine Arts in Athens was our first partner. So in the beginning, we were thinking how to do programming together, but also how to experiment. And for me, institutions are a new thing, although I was teaching before, but how to experiment like institutional merging. So I was invited to become a guest tutor there, and we started this course, Elective Affinities. So, of course, the title probably you recognize, we're at the Goethe-Institut here. So it's the book by Goethe about the changing of relationships through time. And so it started a bit because when we wanted to inscribe, we wanted to do a program within the school, but not just as we say earlier, like landing as a spaceship, but to be part of the school program. So we went through the bureaucratic system of having the program inscribed as an actual class that people could opt. So those are elective classes, right? So there was this sort of very pragmatic way of calling it elective. At the same time, I had been fascinated by a sort of this concept of chemical attractions, of how do relationships change through time, but also thinking of education as and artistic productions in these terms. So in the book, it's about human relations, but I would expand that to a larger set of relations. And we were discussing with our artistic director specifically one essay by Walter Benjamin, who wrote on elective affinities. But this is just the genesis of the title. And actually what we do, we meet there. First of all, we meet there on a weekly basis with a group of students at Inscribed. And then at the same time, it's a way to introduce different artistic practices that are coming to Athens from Documenta 14. For instance, we just did a 3-day seminar with a photographer, Akimbode Akimbi, with the students. So thinking a lot about the photography collective production and thinking very much about the school as a site of learning and how to break out of the classroom, actually. So there are monthly 3-day clusters, what we call, with different artists. We read actually a lot of the texts that I read today are texts that we have been reading very closely with the students because we started to depart from South as a state of mind, as a sort of reading material or reading source to enter into the broader question of collective production. Yeah, is that?
Thank you very much. I would like also to address a question, and I have then another one which just came from by email. I have the feeling you use a lot of poetry, or at least in the way that you have described it, described the program, and also through the performative aspect you gave. So do you think that this is a kind of like say, grounding of your educational or uneducational work in Documenta? Or like maybe a second question also, a lot of, like, let's say, education today is focused on making things more easy for students, any kind of students, grown-up students or whatever. And there is also like an alternative understanding of education, more like a growing complexity. Like education should be based on a broader understanding that makes things actually not easy, but the opposite, makes things as things to think about them more deeply, in a more complex way, in a more, let's say, grounding also way. Do you think that poetry, for example, something that we neglect, yeah? I mean, in the most cases, like poetry, yes, does it have to do with education, really? And I'm talking about a broader education, not becoming a poet, becoming a manager, or becoming a scientist, and so on. Is poetry and a growing complexity of thinking important for your program?
I mean, thank you for the question. In a way, poetry could be incredibly simple and open up all these complexities through simplicity. And perhaps also in education, I remember my philosopher professor from high school, which was very important to me, always said how important it is, like that one of the hardest things in philosophy is to be able to also come with very lucid and simple terminology for complex matters. So I don't know if they're always in opposing grounds. And is it a grounding point? I'm often scared of having a grounding point. Through my life, it hasn't been really a place where I could be grounded always. There was, like Cecilia Vicuña said, language is a migrant, and so has my body and my ground. So I guess, yes, poetry is definitely part of that movement and that atmosphere for me. And
I mean, I think definitely what I've really appreciated in Documenta 14 is thinking about how language is a vehicle to communicate ideas, and very complex ideas. And I feel as though poetry is another kind of voice, different from a kind of instructional one, different from one which is didactic, and it's a voice, you know. And I think that this notion of voicing is an extremely important one, and has kind of had various resonances. So I think one of those resonances is recognizing the voice in relation to the body, and also recognizing the voice maybe in relation to performativity, but also recognizing the inner voice and what that might mean. So I really love that in this performance today, that there was this duality of these, recognizing the voice of maybe the author and the one that performs it, and then what becomes is maybe something that is co-authored. So this is also something I think that resonates very much with the chorus, because they hold many voices, but there's also an individual subjectivity that we think is very important to also display or to acknowledge. But your second question was about the complexity, and yeah, I mean, I always have to think back to when I previously, when I worked on Manifesto, I think one of the things that I learned through this project was that, you know, art might bring many ways to think about changing the world, and it might make it more complex. So it's not necessarily about a simplification, but it is definitely something that I think agitates thinking and creates discussion and forms dialogue.
Thank you. We have a question.
Hello. I would like to ask you, as I listen to you speaking, I realize that you are actually proposing a new way on seeing education. So that is like a project on education. Then, learning from Athens has this question, learning from Athens. I would like to know, what is your connection, as I'm sure that you have, with communities in Athens and with this knowledge that education at the moment in Athens is a critical matter, and there are many artistic teams, there are many people mainly professors, mainly on the second degree, secondary education, that are actually revolutionary in the way that they, I'm sure you're familiar with those movements, actually. So what is their connection to your program? Is there any connection? Is there a kind of methodology crossings or new ways of exchange?
Do you want to talk about Zaphos? Yeah. So actually, one of the first people that we met within Athens actually was advised by, well, to Adam, was this network of teachers called the Frantic Teachers Network. And an incredible group of educators, teachers, and what we found very quickly actually is this kind of network that sits kind of, let's say, sometimes in a way invisible. You know, there are these schools that are in various places. You often hear the sound of children, but it's not exactly, the relationship between the school and the city is not necessarily exposed. And this was something that we kind of discussed at the beginning, this notion of the child as a city, going from the school to the city. And we talked very much about how a lot of the schools that were built in the 20s and 30s in Athens, under this idea of a kind of reformation of education, actually started with the architectural structures and the relationship of creating this from the pupil, from the student to the citizen. And this has been something we've worked, let's say, in our schools program, so the formal education program, in a number of experimental schools. And we've kind of phrase this as sites of learning, and there's various sites of learning. This was only one. Another was the Piccionis path, which Anissa was very much inspired by. But I think for us, we would have not been able to have done the schools program if it was not for this connection with the schools. And I think actually currently there is again another kind of reformation that's happening within education. And I'm excited to see how this will continue to develop. Mm-hmm.
Very small detail. I didn't understand. You were referring to the program of the 30s in Greece of reform education with Karadinos and this kind of work.
Because
so this is a kind of historical research, let's say, that you combine with contemporary.
With what's happening in those schools today. Yeah, exactly.
I guess so we were.
School, you mean, and all this,
exactly.
I guess we were this person that this network that Cepake is referring to, the frantic teacher, Babis Baltrak, one of them, of the teachers. I mean, somehow, when I moved to Athens, it was sort of a twofold way of learning through him and through the books and the architecture and through the walking in the space, because for him, he's a teacher that was really a close advisor to us and very active in the teachers' community in the city. And for Babis, the architecture, like he was thinking very closely with the students how the architecture determines the space, the methodology of education, like the type of learning. Like even here today, how I love it how we are sitting in this configuration instead of a different configuration. And then it was incredible, so via his words and his meetings, and then we often also the visits to the schools, so like the Zeneto school, for instance, which was great, and the Piccionis, which she mentioned. Yeah.
Wonderful. Guys, I hear the piano playing. I'm sure there are a lot of things to discuss. It's a great a theme of great importance, I believe, and I will have probably also the opportunity. First of all, we have to thank you for being here, and wish, of course, also like Documenta in Athens, like a great start. That's going to be like in basically a week, right? Also, like say hello to our friends watching in Athens right now. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. And after that, we'll have like a short break, and we'd like to thank you.
5 minutes, and then we come back for the next session.
Of course.
I look forward to welcome you in the Athens School of Fine Arts and in any other of our venues.
Thank you.
Thank you.